That junk is worth nothing. Hang.
That junk is worth nothing. The words, harsh and dripping with disdain, sliced through the celebratory atmosphere of the Miami Beach Classic Car Show. John Sterling, CEO of Sterling Motors, a billionaire titan of the luxury automotive industry, stood fuming beside his pristine, multi-million-dollar vintage Ferrari. His fury was directed at a small, unassuming Volkswagen Beetle, lovingly restored but undeniably weathered, which had just inexplicably won the Spirit of Restoration Award, an award John felt belonged to his flawless machine. Beside the Beetle stood Maya Johnson, its owner and restorer, a young woman whose grease-stained overalls couldn't entirely hide her quiet dignity or the flash of hurt in her eyes. John, blinded by arrogance and wounded pride, strode towards her, his expensive Italian shoes clicking ominously on the polished floor. "How dare they?" he spat, gesturing dismissively at the Beetle. "This piece of scrap doesn't belong here. It's an insult to collectors, an insult to me. What back alley did you drag this tin can out of?" Maya flinched but held her ground. "This car has history, Mr. Sterling. It has heart. It represents dedication, not just a blank check." John laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Heart? Dedication? My dear girl, this is a playground for the elite. Your heart belongs in a junkyard. You know, I own half the buildings on the block where your little garage sits. Maybe it's time for some urban renewal." The threat hung heavy in the air. John, known for his ruthless business tactics and utter lack of empathy, saw Maya and her car as nothing more than an insignificant nuisance, easily crushed. He turned on his heel, leaving Maya trembling, not just from the humiliation, but from the very real fear of losing her small, struggling, independent garage, the only legacy left by her late father. The collision was inevitable. John's world of cold, hard cash had just declared war on Maya's world of passion and perseverance, built around a car he deemed worthless. John Sterling wasn't a man accustomed to being second best, especially not to a patched-up Beetle and a woman in dirty overalls. His rise from modest beginnings to the pinnacle of the automotive world had been fueled by relentless ambition and a brutal intolerance for anything perceived as mediocre. He saw the world in terms of winners and losers, and that little Beetle winning an award over his meticulously sourced Ferrari felt like a personal affront, a crack in the perfect facade he had built. His relationship with his father, a stern, demanding man who equated success only with financial dominance, had shaped him. Affection had been conditional, praise rare. John learned early that power and wealth were the only reliable shields against the world's indifference. He'd clawed his way up, making calculated decisions, sometimes cutting corners, often stepping on others. Ben Johnson, Maya's father, had been one of those early casualties, though John barely registered him at the time. Ben Johnson was a quiet genius, a man who saw elegance in mechanics and poetry in motion. He'd landed a junior engineering position at Sterling Motors in its early days, full of hope and innovative ideas. He poured his heart into designs that were ahead of their time, concepts focused on efficiency, sustainability, ideas that seemed radical in an era obsessed with sheer horsepower. He remembered presenting a rudimentary concept for a hyper-efficient, low-emission engine modification to a young, fiercely ambitious department manager named John Sterling. John, eager to impress his own superiors with quick, flashy results, had barely glanced at the complex schematics. "Johnson," he'd said dismissively, "we build aspirational machines, not glorified lawnmowers. Stick to the program." The rejection stung Ben deeply, not just professionally, but personally. It was a dismissal of his core values. He left Sterling Motors shortly after, disillusioned, and poured his energy into his small neighborhood garage, fixing cars for people who appreciated his skill and honesty. He bought the old Beetle, seeing potential beneath its worn exterior, dreaming of one day implementing his own engine ideas, proving Sterling wrong. Maya grew up amidst the smell of oil and the comforting rhythm of tools. She learned from her father, absorbing his quiet passion, his meticulous approach, his belief that a car could have a soul. The Beetle became their shared project, a bond forged in grease and gears. "One day, Maya," Ben would say, wiping his hands on a rag, "we'll show them what this little car can really do." His sudden death from a heart attack left Maya adrift, with only the garage, a mountain of bills, and the half-finished Beetle. Restoring it became her mission, a tribute to her father, a way to keep his spirit alive. She spent every spare moment, every spare dollar, painstakingly rebuilding it. And as she worked on the engine, she didn't just restore it. Drawing on her father's old notes and her own intuitive brilliance, she refined and implemented the very engine concept John Sterling had once mocked. It wasn't just restoration, it was innovation born from love and legacy. The Miami Beach Classic Car Show was her chance to honor her father's memory, to show the world their shared dream realized. Winning the Spirit of Restoration Award wasn't about the prize money. It was validation, a recognition of the heart and soul poured into that little car. John Sterling's cruel outburst hadn't just insulted her, it had desecrated her father's memory. The stage was set long before the car show, a history of dismissed brilliance, thwarted dreams, and the stark contrast between value measured in dollars and value measured in dedication and heart. The weeks following the car show descended into a grim reality for Maya. John Sterling, true to his venomous promise, moved swiftly. The eviction notice arrived like a death knell, plastered crudely on the garage door. It cited flimsy, exaggerated code violations, a cracked window here, peeling paint there, pretexts easily manufactured by Sterling's high-powered legal team. Maya stared at the official paper, the legalese blurring through her tears. This wasn't just a building. It was her father's legacy, her home, the sanctuary where she'd painstakingly brought the Beetle back to life. Losing it felt like losing her father all over again. Panic tightened its icy grip around her chest. She spent frantic days seeking legal aid, navigating a bewildering maze of paperwork and bureaucracy, only to be met with sympathetic shrugs or exorbitant retainer fees she couldn't possibly afford. Nights were worse, filled with the gnawing anxiety of impending homelessness and the crushing weight of failure. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by nightmares of bulldozers tearing down the garage walls. The stress manifested physically. She lost weight, dark circles bloomed under her eyes, and the joy she usually found in her work evaporated, replaced by a constant, dull ache of despair. Meanwhile, John Sterling reveled in his perceived victory. He recounted the car show incident with smug satisfaction to his fiancée, Tiffany, a woman whose values mirrored his own, prizing status and appearance above all else. That little mechanic needed to be put in her place, he sneered over expensive champagne at a rooftop bar overlooking the glittering Miami skyline. Trying to rub shoulders with her betters, the eviction will take care of that eyesore of a garage and her ridiculous little car. Tiffany laughed, adjusting her diamond necklace. Good riddance, darling. That part of town needs an upgrade anyway. Perhaps a luxury spa? John smirked. He'd already dispatched surveyors, envisioning another high-rise condo, another monument to his success built on the rubble of someone else's life. He pictured Maya, defeated and desperate, forced to sell her worthless Beetle for scrap. The thought filled him with a cold sense of satisfaction, a perverse validation of his power. He drove past her garage occasionally, slowing his Bentley just enough to observe her struggle. He saw the "for sale" sign go up on some of her equipment, saw her talking anxiously on the phone, saw the lights on late into the night as she presumably packed her life away. Each sign of her distress fueled his sense of triumph. He had won. He had crushed the insignificant annoyance. Yet amidst the smug satisfaction, a tiny, unwelcome seed of doubt began to sprout, almost imperceptibly at first. Why had that Beetle won? The judges weren't typically swayed by sentiment. They were hardened experts, meticulous car enthusiasts. Pity seemed unlikely. Corruption? possible, but why over a minor award for a Beetle? It didn't quite add up. The technical precision he'd glimpsed in the online restoration photos also nagged at him. The engine work looked sophisticated, more than just a tune-up. It was a dissonant note in the symphony of his self-assuredness, a question mark he couldn't entirely ignore, even as he focused on orchestrating Maya's downfall. He dismissed it as irrelevant. Even if the work was decent, it was still just a Beetle, junk. But the question lingered, a faint crack in the otherwise perfect edifice of his certainty. The nagging inconsistency surrounding the Beetle's award refused to fade from John Sterling's mind. It was a loose thread in the otherwise tightly woven fabric of his world order. While his lawyers finalized the eviction, ensuring Maya Johnson would be thrown out onto the street with her junk car, John found himself making a call he normally wouldn't bother with. He contacted Andrew Vance, one of the senior judges from the car show, a man whose technical expertise John grudgingly respected. "Andrew," John began, forcing a casual tone, "John Sterling here. Bit of a curiosity about that Spirit of Restoration award. Seemed an odd choice, the Beetle." Vance sounded surprised by the call. "John, well, it surprised us too initially, but the technical submission from Ms. Johnson, quite remarkable actually. Beyond just restoration." John felt a prickle of interest. "Remarkable how?" "Look," Vance hesitated, "the detailed notes are confidential, internal deliberation stuff. But let's just say what she's done with that old flat-4 engine. It's not standard. Significant efficiency gains, emission reduction figures that seem almost impossible for that platform. Frankly, some of the panel thought the data might be faked, but the physical inspection backed it up. Clever engineering." John's mind raced. Efficiency gains, impossible emission figures. This wasn't just a tune-up, it sounded like genuine innovation. "Andrew," John pressed, "I have a significant interest in automotive technology, as you know. Would it be possible, strictly off the record, for me to see those technical notes? Purely academic curiosity." Vance paused. John Sterling was a powerful man, not someone you easily refused. "All right, John. Strictly confidential. I'll have my assistant securely email the relevant technical assessment sections, but this stays between us." When the encrypted file arrived, John dismissed his appointments for the rest of the afternoon. He locked his office door and opened the document. What he read made him sit bolt upright. Page after page detailed Maya Johnson's engine modifications. It wasn't just a restoration. It was a complete conceptual overhaul integrated into the old Beetle engine block. She had designed and implemented a novel combustion cycle enhancement, coupled with a unique, low-cost exhaust gas recirculation system. The projected figures weren't just good, they were revolutionary. Fuel efficiency improvements exceeding 70%. Emissions reduced to levels that rivaled expensive, modern hybrid systems, achieved with readily available materials and relatively simple mechanical adjustments. This wasn't just clever engineering. It was a potential multi-billion-dollar breakthrough in green automotive technology, sitting inside the very car he had publicly mocked and was actively trying to destroy. His initial shock quickly turned to calculation. This Maya Johnson wasn't just some sentimental grease monkey. She was potentially a genius, and her junk car held a secret that could reshape the industry, his industry. He immediately thought of his own R&D department at Sterling Motors, the millions poured into developing similar green technologies with frustratingly slow progress. They had teams of PhDs, state-of-the-art labs, and they hadn't come close to this level of efficiency with such cost-effective methods. A flicker of memory surfaced, a vague recollection of similar, less refined concepts being discussed years ago, ideas quickly shot down as impractical. Whose ideas were those? He couldn't quite place it, but the name Johnson, it tickled the edge of his memory. He still viewed Maya through the lens of cynical opportunity, but the nature of the opportunity had shifted dramatically. It wasn't about crushing an annoyance anymore. It was about acquiring, controlling this unexpected technological goldmine. He hadn't yet made the connection to her father, but the seed of doubt about the Beetle's worthlessness had bloomed into a shocking revelation of its immense potential value. His plan to simply evict Maya suddenly seemed short-sighted, even foolish. He needed to know more. Maya is facing eviction while sitting on a gold mine John just discovered. What would you do if you were John? Let us know below. The revelation of the Beetle's hidden technology consumed John Sterling. The potential value was staggering, easily dwarfing the petty satisfaction he'd sought in Maya's ruin. His mind, honed by years of ruthless acquisition, shifted gears. He needed to understand the full scope of this invention and, more importantly, its origins. The nagging familiarity of the name Johnson, coupled with the memory of dismissed innovative ideas, demanded investigation. He instructed his most trusted executive assistant, a discreet and efficient woman named Evelyn, to pull the personnel files from Sterling Motors archives, specifically looking for anyone named Johnson who worked in engineering 15, maybe 20 years ago. "Be thorough, Evelyn," he commanded, "and keep this strictly confidential. No one else needs to know." While Evelyn delved into the digital catacombs of the company's history, John tasked a private investigator, the same one he occasionally used for sensitive corporate espionage, to discreetly gather information on Maya Johnson. "I want everything," John instructed the investigator, a grizzled man named Mike. "Her background, her financials, her associates, her work habits, and especially anything about her father. Find out who he was, what he did." John framed it as standard due diligence before a potential business interaction, masking his true, more complex motives. The investigator's initial reports painted a picture of Maya that subtly chipped away at John's preconceived notions. She was, by all accounts, hard-working, honest, and deeply respected in her small community. Neighbors spoke of her kindness, helping elderly residents with car troubles for free, mentoring local kids interested in mechanics. Financial records showed she lived modestly, pouring every spare cent back into the garage, struggling but maintaining her independence. There was no sign of hidden wealth or questionable dealings. She seemed genuine. Then came the report on her father. Benjamin Ben Johnson died suddenly 5 years ago, highly skilled mechanic, ran the garage before Maya took over. And before that, the investigator confirmed it. Junior engineer, Sterling Motors, employed for 3 years, approximately 18 years ago. The puzzle pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture John found increasingly unsettling. Simultaneously, Evelyn delivered the archived personnel file. John opened it with a sense of trepidation. Benjamin Johnson. The photo showed a younger man with kind eyes, vaguely familiar. John scanned the employment dates, the job description. Then he found them, copies of internal memos and project proposals Ben had submitted, ideas for improving engine efficiency, reducing emissions using unconventional methods, and attached to one of the most promising proposals, the one outlining a concept strikingly similar to the core of Maya's innovation, was a rejection memo. John stared at the signature at the bottom, his own, dated 18 years ago. He remembered the meeting now, vaguely. A young engineer, earnest and passionate, trying to explain complex theories to a manager focused solely on immediate marketable results. John recalled his impatience, his dismissive wave of the hand, the feeling that this Johnson fellow was wasting his time with pipe dreams. He hadn't just overlooked Ben Johnson, he had actively shut him down. The memory, once buried, now resurfaced with sickening clarity. He, John Sterling, had dismissed the very ideas that his multi-million-dollar R&D department was now failing to replicate. He had potentially crushed the spirit of a brilliant innovator, and now, years later, he was on the verge of crushing his daughter, the inheritor and perfecter of that same brilliance. The arrogance of his past actions, the cruelty of his present ones, it all converged into a nauseating wave of self-awareness. This wasn't just about a valuable technology anymore. It was about a profound, personal failure, a cycle of dismissal and destruction he had perpetuated. The quiet investigation hadn't just revealed Maya's secret, it had revealed John's own complicity in a long-buried injustice. The weight of the revelation pressed down on John Sterling, heavier than any boardroom pressure he had ever faced. The personnel file lay open on his vast mahogany desk. Ben Johnson's hopeful face in the faded ID photo, a stark contrast to the dismissive rejection memo bearing John's own youthful, arrogant signature. He saw it all now, the dismissed engineer, the daughter fulfilling his legacy, the revolutionary technology born from a dream he himself had crushed years ago, and his own recent, petty cruelty threatening to destroy it all over again. The image of Maya in her garage, surrounded by packing boxes, her quiet dignity replaced by weary resignation, flashed in his mind. The eviction was scheduled for the next morning. His lawyers, following his earlier vindictive instructions, had ensured every legal obstacle was in place, making any last-minute appeal virtually impossible for someone with Maya's limited resources. He had set an unstoppable machine in motion, driven by spite, and now he was horrified by the destination. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly, an unfamiliar sensation for a man known for his icy control. He dialed his lead attorney, Marcus Thorne. "Marcus," John said, his voice tight, "the Johnson eviction. Call it off. Now." Thorne sounded bewildered. "John, but everything is set. The marshals are scheduled for 8 a.m. We won. It sends the right message." "I don't give a damn about the message," John snapped, the carefully controlled facade cracking. "Kill the order. Make it disappear. Use whatever excuse you need, file whatever emergency stay is required, bribe whoever needs bribing. I don't care. Just stop it. Is that understood?" The sheer force in John's voice left no room for argument. "Understood, John. Consider it stopped." John hung up, breathing heavily. He had stopped the immediate destruction, but the larger, more complex damage remained. How could he possibly approach Maya now? How could he undo the humiliation, the fear, the very real threat he had inflicted upon her? Simply cancelling the eviction felt hollow, insufficient. It didn't address the history, the dismissed father, the nearly stolen invention. He thought about sending money, a large anonymous check to ease her financial burden, but that felt like the old John Sterling solution, throwing cash at a problem to make it go away, avoiding genuine accountability. It felt like another insult. He considered sending lawyers to negotiate a deal for the engine technology, offering her a generous sum. But that, too, felt exploitative, an attempt to buy the brilliance he had once scorned without acknowledging the human cost. No, this required something different, something he hadn't done in decades, perhaps ever. It required humility. It required facing Maya Johnson directly, not as a titan of industry dictating terms, but as a man admitting profound error. The thought terrified him more than any hostile takeover bid. What would he even say? How could he explain the tangled history, his past blindness, his recent vindictiveness, without sounding like he was making excuses, or worse, trying to manipulate her now that he knew the value of her work? He paced his opulent office, the city lights glittering below, usually a symbol of his dominion, now feeling like judgmental eyes. He looked again at Ben Johnson's file, at the photo of the hopeful young engineer. He owed Ben more than a dismissed memo. He owed Maya more than a cancelled eviction. He owed them both the truth, however difficult, however humbling. He grabbed his coat. The night was late, the eviction mere hours away. He didn't know if Maya would even let him through the door, if she would throw his apology back in his face. He didn't know if reconciliation was possible, but he knew he had to try. He had to face the consequences of his actions, past and present. He drove himself, dismissing his chauffeur, needing the solitude to gather his thoughts, his usual confidence replaced by a churning mix of shame, regret, and a flicker of desperate hope. The single bare bulb hanging from the rafters cast long, distorted shadows across Maya's garage. Boxes filled with tools, parts, and fragments of her life were stacked haphazardly, monuments to a future that had been stolen. The air hung thick with the smell of old oil, dust, and defeat. Maya moved slowly, methodically wrapping a wrench in newspaper, her movements heavy with exhaustion and despair. The eviction was hours away. She had called everyone, explored every option, but John Sterling's legal machine had been ruthlessly efficient. There was nowhere else to go. The Beetle, her father's dream and her own triumph, stood silently in the corner, a gleaming anomaly in the surrounding gloom. She ran a hand over its smooth red fender, tears welling up. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I tried." The sound of a car pulling up outside, an expensive engine idling, made her tense. Probably Sterling's men, coming early to gloat or to ensure she was packing quickly enough. She braced herself, wiping her eyes, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. But when the door creaked open, it wasn't a lawyer or a marshal standing there. It was John Sterling himself alone, looking utterly out of place amidst the organized chaos of her garage. His usually impeccable suit seemed rumpled, his face drawn and shadowed, the predatory glint in his eyes replaced by something she couldn't immediately identify. Weariness, perhaps even shame. Maya straightened up, suspicion instantly flaring. "Come to watch the final act, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice tight with bitterness. "To make sure the trash gets taken out on schedule." He flinched, the words hitting their mark. He shook his head, looking not at her, but around the garage, taking in the evidence of her life being dismantled. "No," he said, his voice low, lacking its usual commanding tone. I came because the eviction is cancelled. It stopped, effective immediately." Maya stared, uncomprehending. "Cancelled? What kind of cruel joke is this?" "It's not a joke." He finally met her eyes, and she saw the conflict there, the struggle behind the carefully constructed mask. "I called it off an hour ago. You're not losing the garage." Confusion warred with suspicion. "Why? Why would you do that after everything?" John took a deep breath, the confession visibly costing him. "Because I was wrong. Utterly, arrogantly wrong. About the car show, about this garage, about everything." He paused, then forced himself to continue. "And because I knew your father." The name hit Maya like a physical blow. My father? Ben Johnson?" "Yes." John looked down at his expensive shoes, unable to hold her gaze. "He worked at Sterling Motors years ago. He was a junior engineer." He produced a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a copy of the rejection memo he had signed 18 years prior. He proposed ideas, engine concepts. Similar. He gestured towards the Beetle. "Remarkably similar to what you've achieved here." "Ideas I dismissed." He handed her the memo. "I was young, arrogant, focused only on the fastest way up. I didn't see the brilliance right in front of me. I shut him down." Maya unfolded the paper, her hands trembling as she read the cold, corporate words rejecting her father's vision, signed by the man standing before her. Tears streamed down her face, tears of anger, grief, and a bewildering sense of validation. "He never told me," she choked out. "He never told me he worked for you, or that his ideas were rejected. He just kept working on them here. For years." "I know," John said quietly. "I found his personnel file. I found the proposals. And then I read the judge's notes from the car show about your engine, and I finally understood." He looked up, his expression raw, with a humility she never thought possible. "What you've done here, Maya, perfecting his vision, achieving what my entire R&D department couldn't, it's extraordinary. And I almost destroyed it again, out of petty spite." He ran a hand over his face. "The cruelty, there's no excuse. All I can offer is the truth and a profound apology for what I did to your father then, and for what I almost did to you now." The silence stretched, filled only by the distant sounds of the city and Maya's ragged breathing. She looked from the memo to John, then to the Beetle. Her father's legacy, her own hard work, the years of struggle, the recent weeks of terror, it all swirled together. "So," she finally said, her voice hoarse but steady, "what now, Mr. Sterling? You cancel the eviction, apologize, and expect everything to be forgotten." "No," he said quickly, "absolutely not. This isn't about forgetting. It's about trying to make amends. It's about honoring your father's legacy and your own genius. He took another deep breath. I want to offer you a partnership, not a buyout. A genuine partnership. Sterling Motors will provide whatever you need: funding, resources, engineers, lab facilities to develop this technology further. But, he emphasized, holding up a hand, you retain full ownership of your intellectual property, majority control, full credit. This garage, he looked around again, this time with respect, becomes the heart of the operation. Johnson Innovations. We build this together, on your terms. He produced another document, a hastily drafted preliminary partnership offer, its terms astonishingly favorable to her. This is just a starting point. Your lawyers can review it, change anything. The power is entirely yours. Maya stared at the document, then back at John. His offer was more than fair. It was almost self-sacrificing from a business perspective. It acknowledged her value, her father's history, her right to control her own creation. It wasn't just an apology. It was tangible atonement, an action that spoke louder than any words. Was it possible? Could this man, who had embodied everything she despised, truly be offering a path to redemption for both of them? Maya didn't jump at the offer. The wounds inflicted by John Sterling, both the fresh ones from the car show and the eviction threat, and the older inherited ones stemming from his dismissal of her father, were too deep for instant trust. She looked at the preliminary partnership agreement, then back at John, her eyes narrowed with the hard-won caution of someone used to fighting for every inch. On my terms, she repeated, the question sharp. Completely, John affirmed, meeting her gaze directly, his usual arrogance replaced by a quiet intensity. Your lawyers, your conditions. I wronged you and your father. This isn't about me dictating anything. It's about providing the resources you deserve to bring his vision to fruition. The next few weeks were a blur of intense negotiations. Maya, proving as shrewd in business as she was brilliant in mechanics, hired a sharp intellectual property lawyer recommended by one of her old community contacts. She didn't rely on sentiment. She demanded ironclad clauses protecting her ownership, guaranteeing her creative control, and ensuring a significant majority of future profits flowed back to Johnson Innovations. She insisted on maintaining the garage as the primary R&D site, integrating Sterling's resources rather than being absorbed by them. She even stipulated clauses ensuring ethical manufacturing practices and affordable licensing options for smaller companies, reflecting her father's values over pure profit maximization. To the surprise of Maya's lawyer, and perhaps even to Maya herself, John agreed to everything. He didn't haggle, didn't push back, didn't try to insert corporate loopholes. His legal team, accustomed to his usual aggressive tactics, were baffled. John attended every negotiation session personally, listening more than he spoke, deferring to Maya's decisions. When her lawyer pushed for an upfront multi-million-dollar good-faith investment into the garage's infrastructure before the main partnership officially launched, John signed the check without hesitation. It was a tangible sacrifice, putting significant capital at risk based purely on her word and his newfound commitment to atonement. He also took immediate public steps. He issued a formal press release through Sterling Motors, retracting his previous statements about the Beetle, publicly apologizing to Maya for his behavior at the car show, and announcing the preliminary stages of an exciting technological partnership with Johnson Innovations, explicitly crediting Maya as the lead innovator. He didn't mention her father publicly. That was private pain, not for corporate spin. But he made sure the narrative celebrated her achievement. The reaction from his own circle was predictable. Tiffany, his fiancée, was appalled. Partnering with that grease monkey after she embarrassed you? John, have you lost your mind? Think of our image. John looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the vapid materialism, the utter lack of substance that he now found repellent. Our image, Tiffany, or my integrity. There are more important things than image. Their relationship, already strained by his preoccupation since the revelation, shattered definitively. He realized he didn't want a partner who only valued his status. He wanted something real, something his brief, humbling interactions with Maya had unexpectedly illuminated. Some board members at Sterling Motors also grumbled, questioning the wisdom of investing heavily in an unproven entity run by an unknown mechanic and giving away so much control. John addressed them directly in an emergency meeting. "This isn't just an investment," he stated firmly. "It's correcting a past wrong by this company. It's investing in a technology that will secure our future. And Ms. Johnson is the key. We do this her way, or we don't do it at all. And I," he added, looking around the table, "am personally guaranteeing this venture." His conviction, backed by his willingness to put his own reputation and capital on the line, silenced most dissent. He was still the CEO, but his leadership was subtly shifting from ruthless command to purpose-driven conviction. Through these actions, the fair negotiations, the immediate financial backing, the public apology, the break from his materialistic fiancée, the defense of the partnership within his own company, John began to lay the foundation for trust. Maya observed it all, still cautious, but recognizing the consistent effort, the tangible sacrifices. He wasn't just talking about making amends, he was actively doing it. Step by painful, humbling step, the partnership agreement was finally signed, not in Sterling's sterile boardroom, but in Maya's cluttered garage office, the Beetle visible through the window. As they shook hands, Maya felt not triumph, but a complex mix of relief, lingering caution, and the dawning possibility of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. John felt a profound sense of release, the first step on a long road towards redeeming not just his company's past, but his own. 6 months later, the transformation was striking. Maya's once struggling garage, now officially the Johnson Innovations Lab, powered by Sterling Motors, buzzed with focused energy. Fresh paint covered the walls, new diagnostic equipment gleamed under bright LED lights, and a small team of engineers, handpicked by Maya and funded by Sterling, collaborated intently around computer monitors displaying complex engine simulations. The atmosphere was one of quiet excitement, a startup's agility backed by corporate resources, all guided by Maya's clear vision. The vintage Volkswagen Beetle, meticulously maintained, occupied a place of honor in a specially built glass enclosure near the entrance, a constant reminder of the project's origins and the legacy it carried. Maya, no longer just a mechanic, but the chief innovation officer of her own burgeoning enterprise, moved through the lab with confidence. She hadn't changed her practical attire, overalls were still her uniform, but her eyes shone with purpose, free from the shadows of financial anxiety. She led her team with quiet authority, her deep understanding of mechanics, complemented by the strategic business insights she was rapidly developing. John Sterling was a regular, though careful, presence. He visited the lab weekly, not for oversight, but for updates and discussions. He arrived not in his chauffeur-driven Bentley, but often in a more modest Sterling sedan, driving himself. He shed the power suits for smart, casual attire, consciously adopting the role of a supportive partner rather than a commanding CEO. He listened intently during technical briefings, asking thoughtful questions, deferring to Maya's expertise. He never interfered with her decisions, focusing instead on ensuring Sterling Motors provided the necessary support, streamlining supply chains, navigating regulatory hurdles, connecting her with manufacturing partners. He learned the names of her team members, inquired about their progress, and celebrated small breakthroughs with genuine enthusiasm. His transformation wasn't overtly dramatic, but it was evident in his demeanor, the absence of arrogance, the presence of respect, the quiet satisfaction he seemed to derive from fostering Maya's success. He had also quietly established the Ben Johnson Memorial Scholarship at the local technical college, fully funding tuition for promising young mechanics from underprivileged backgrounds, a private act of atonement that Maya learned about indirectly and acknowledged with a simple, grateful nod. Their interactions found a new equilibrium built on mutual professional respect. The raw emotions of the confrontation had settled into a functional, even warm, working relationship. One afternoon, they stood together looking at the enshrined Beetle. "He would be incredibly proud, Maya," John said softly. Maya looked at the car, then at John. "Yes," she agreed, "he would be, and proud that we finally made it happen." The subtle emphasis on "we" acknowledged his role in rectifying the past and enabling the future. It wasn't forgiveness, perhaps not yet, but it was acceptance, a recognition of his changed role. The initial prototypes, based on Maya's refined technology, were exceeding all expectations in rigorous testing. Sterling Motors was preparing for a major industry announcement, poised to leapfrog competitors in the green technology race. Thanks entirely to the innovation born in Maya's garage, John ensured all press materials centered Maya and Johnson innovations, positioning Sterling Motors as the enabling partner, not the owner. Tiffany was long gone, unable to comprehend John's shift in priorities from image to integrity, their breakup barely registering amidst the excitement of the new venture. The board members, initially skeptical, were now anticipating a massive return on investment, grudgingly acknowledging John's foresight. The story of the female mechanic, the dismissed father, and the revolutionary Beetle became a quiet legend within the automotive industry, a testament to perseverance, the unexpected sources of innovation, and the possibility of redemption. John Sterling, once defined solely by his billions, was slowly redefining himself through his actions, fostering genius rather than dismissing it, building bridges rather than walls, finding a deeper, more meaningful form of success in enabling Maya's triumph and honoring her father's forgotten legacy. The true, enduring wealth they both came to understand wasn't measured on a balance sheet or displayed in a showroom, but was forged in the fires of ingenuity, tempered by humility, and found in the quiet dignity of making things right. What did you think of John's transformation and Maya's incredible journey? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. If stories of resilience and redemption inspire you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories and amazing tales.